One of the biggest reasons why most people stay stuck has nothing to do with talent, has nothing to do with opportunities, but it's rather their old identity that they're holding on to. Whether you realize it or not, some of the identities that you built are holding you back from the person you need to become. One of the crazy things about life is, whether you realize it or not, we've all kind of put ourselves in these boxes. And it starts like this. When you go to an event or you meet someone new, someone typically asks you the notorious question, what do you do? And some people will say, well, I'm a nurse, I'm a student, I do X, Y, and Z. But those are the boxes that we place ourselves in. And the danger with this is you start to conform to that identity. Now, for some of you, it makes sense. Like, for example, one of the identities I carry is I'm a brother. But what happens when the identity that you hold, the old identity, is holding you back from your new identity that you want to step into? Like, if you have the identity for being someone who shows up late, how do you break free of that and shift to your new identity that you want to have? Or if you have certain habits or vices like drugs, smoking, vape, pornography, how do you break free of that old identity to shift into your new identity? And in today's video, we're going to talk about it. And I want you to understand that identities in themselves aren't necessarily bad, right? We typically use these identities to kind of put people in categories, but it becomes a problem when us as humans, we're constantly evolving. When I think back to the person who I was at the age of 6, it's nowhere near the person who I am today. And hopefully with the pursuit that I have, like, my identities are going to continue to change throughout the years. The next decade, my identity is going to be completely different. And when I think back to the age of 6, I mean, I had different goals, different priorities. And at the age of 6, all I cared about was Batman and the Ninja Turtles. But now I'm thinking about my career, my future, navigating my purpose, and so much more. And this is important, right? As humans, we are constantly changing. But the issue becomes when you are holding onto your old identity and it's blocking you from stepping into your new identity. And the scariest thing is, many people are holding onto identities that are no longer serving them, that are no longer driving them towards the growth that they hope to achieve. And this is halting their growth. And when I think back to myself on a way that my own identity has held me back before, I think back to when I went to networking events and I used to introduce myself as a student. Like, they would ask me, hey, what's up? What do you do? And I'm like, I'm a student. And the issue with that is I started to adopt all the things I thought that identity was supposed to do. So, like, think about it. What does the typical student do? Well, they show up to class, they might study for a test, they might have exams, they'll get back their grades, go to the library, and the cycle repeats. And the biggest issue that I found with that was I'm so much more than just a student. And the shift I had to make was I had to just stop thinking of myself as just a student, because I started to only think that I had to do what all the students were doing. And the first way I started to change that was I started to identify myself as a high-performing student. So what did that look like? Well, a high-performing student doesn't just focus on their academics. They also build businesses. They also document their journey in real time. They also mentor and inspire other students to do the same things. And that was the first time where I realized how important and powerful it was to not let an identity that you had hold you back from the person you want to become. And it's so crazy because just from that tiny little identity shift, I was able to do a lot more. I was able to step inside and adopt the habits of what I thought a high-performing student was. And I don't really share this side of me with many people, but because all of you are high performers, especially when you watch videos like this, I'm going to let you in on something that has worked wonders for me. And I think about it like conquering spaces. I've had to adopt different identities to show up as the best version of myself in different spaces. As some of you may know, at one point I got a scholarship to play soccer outside of the country. At the same time, I was the valedictorian, student council president. I've worked in research and done a few other things. But each stage that I was a part of required me to adopt a different identity. And the way I look at it is, as a high performer, it's not only enough to just adopt the identity of an athlete, right? You want to be a high performing athlete. You want to be the best athlete that you can possibly be. So then the question then becomes, how do we adopt new identities for different situations that we're going to be put in, but at the same time learning how to excel in those spaces? And it goes back to the concept that I'm talking about, conquering spaces. You have to realize that the identity that you have today might shift. You may not always be a student. You may not always be an entrepreneur. You may not always work for that job. Like, I knew this from like the time I was in high school, that I wasn't going to be a high school student for long, or I wasn't going to be in university forever. So while you're there, you have to conquer that space. You have to be the best version of yourself within that space, because there's actually a window of time before that's ticking. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to transition into a completely new identity, and you want to make sure that you're successful in every single stage of your life. And being able to quickly shift your identity will allow you to be a very multi-dimensional person, right? Like, for me, at one point, my identity is an athlete, then it's a content creator, then it's being an effective public speaker, working on building my brand as an entrepreneur, being a brother and a son. And all these identities require me to adopt different character traits. And one of the biggest things that I've realized is I'm not going to completely box myself into one particular identity. I have to be able to shift and adapt as time flies. And 15 years from now, my identity might be different. Like, who knows? I might be a father, a husband, navigating completely different landscapes. But remember, it's not enough to just shift into these identities. You want to be successful at them. So I'm going to break down exactly how you can do that transition and be as effective as possible. And I want to drive it home with one more example with the identity. And let's take someone who smokes, right? You know, you might smoke occasionally and you might think it's harmless, right? But then sooner or later, you might adopt the identity of a casual smoker. Now that becomes slowly a part of your identity, because now you might have a group of friends that you smoke with, and they might also associate you with the identity of being a casual smoker. So what happens is you start to adopt the identity of that. And let's say later on you realize, you know, I don't want to have that identity anymore. The issue then then becomes the people around you have already associated you with that particular identity. And that's where it can become extremely dangerous. And this becomes very, very difficult just because you start to fight the identity that you had, right? And remember, once this behavior becomes a part of someone's identity, changing becomes much harder because now you're not just fighting a habit, you're fighting who you believe you are. And the crazy thing about this identity shift is it also works in reverse. So I take myself, for example. I remember being at parties and events, and because I've adopted the identity of someone who doesn't smoke, like I remember people skipping over me when they're passing vapes. Like I'll never forget, I was at this party, right? And there was this huge circle and everyone's taking a puff out of this vape, right? I remember I was in high school at the time. I was really interested to see what people would do when it came to me. And I kid you not, as it was getting passed along and everyone was taking their little puffs of vape, the girl who had the vape right beside me actually skipped me and gave it to someone else. And I'm not gonna lie, at first I was a little offended. I'm like, what? She didn't even offer? Like I was gonna obviously say no, but damn, she couldn't have offered. But then I realized I built an identity around not being a smoker. So everybody around me just associates me with that identity. So now that you understand the importance of the identity, we're gonna talk about how you can actually make the appropriate identity shift, right? You might have an identity today that's no longer serving you. So how can we shift that into something that's more productive? And the first thing is the identity audit. So this is where you take some time. I always recommend pen and paper, but you write down all the identities that you have. Some of you are mothers, some of you are sisters, brothers. You might have the identity of being a student. You might work at a particular job. This is going to allow you to get clear on making that identity shift that you need to make. And I want you to get really honest with yourself. Like some of you have identities around negative habits. Maybe you're a casual drinker, so you have an identity around that. Maybe you're someone who loves to sleep in, so you have an identity around that. And the more clear and honest you can get with yourself, the better it will be for this identity shift. Then I want you to ask yourself, like, which one of these identities are actually helping me, bringing me closer to the person that I want to be, and which ones are limiting me? And this only works if you're completely honest with yourself. Like, I'm not asking you to post all your identities in the world, but you need to get very clear and honest with yourself. I need you to dive deep and talk about the things that are holding you back. Do you have an identity around doom scrolling? Have you suffered with pornography? Do you struggle with gambling? Do you procrastinate on the things that you know that you're supposed to do? Write those down because this is how you're going to be able to make the appropriate identity shifts. The next step I want you to do is to define the identity that you need. You need to start asking yourself the questions like, once you've identified the identity that you want to shift into, who is this person actually? What does this person do? What do their habits look like? So let's take an example. Let's say one of your identities is you identify that you're lazy and you're unhealthy and you're not in a good shape. The identity shift that you want to make is you want to become an athlete, right? So then you need to start asking yourself the questions. What does an athlete do? How does an athlete eat? How does an athlete train? Once you get clear on those answers, this is going to allow you to get clear on what the identity is required to make that shift. And you can literally apply this to any example that you want. You can apply this to the person who's a multi-millionaire, the 10x version of yourself, or like I always say, the high-performing version that you know you're supposed to be. This is how you'll know when you're moving towards the right direction or regressing in the wrong direction. And the final step of this puzzle is to actually do the work. There is no substitute for the work because the work works. This is a realization that I had to have. Although I talk about a lot of the identity shifts, a lot of the exercises that you can work on, this means nothing if you're not putting it into action. If you want to become an athlete and if you're not training, if you're not tracking your meals, if you're not increasing resistance, you're not doing the work required to reach that goal. If you want to become an entrepreneur and you're not selling products and services, increasing profits, you are not doing the work required to hit that target. And I love this because the truth is the work shows and the work works. And the sad thing is a lot of people have hidden themselves through the work, right? I've even done this before myself too. In the past, I would do a bunch of shallow work, doing a bunch of low leverage tasks that aren't actually moving the needle forward. But like I said before, once you get clear on what that person is, how they actually operate, you know the work required. So you must do the work. Don't fall. Like I love you guys. Like I love all of you who watch and support me on this channel and on this mission that I have. But I don't want you to fall into the trap of just watching a bunch of self-help videos and doing no work. I want you to watch videos like this and then go out and apply it. Come back, watch a video again and apply it again. Because that's actually the progress that you need to make. But if you're just sitting down and binging hundreds upon videos, you have to realize at some point you're not doing the work required to get to where you need to be. And the craziest thing about the work is a lot of people have a false perception of the work that they're actually doing, right? A lot of people aren't actually tracking their work on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. They're really just freeballing their life and they're saying, well, you know, I'm trying, or I went to the library for 4 hours today or 8 hours today. But when you actually look at it, you were only doing work for about 3 hours, if that. You were distracted on your phone, you were texting your friend, you were scrolling on social media. That's not doing the work that you were supposed to do. And deep down, you know it. And the best part is the results also know it as well. Can't hide beneath those results because the results will show. When you look at someone who's in amazing physical shape, you know that they put in time and effort into their craft. They didn't just say, oh yeah, I showed up to the gym. You see the evidence. It's plain and simple. So as we wrap up this video, I want you to understand that throughout your life as a human and as a high performer, you are going to evolve. You're going to have to make identity shifts. But the biggest issue I see with so many people is that they allow their old identity to prevent them from stepping into their new identity. But as a high performer, you cannot allow that to happen. Throughout your life, as you continue to grow, you're going to have to adopt new identities. You currently have identities right now that are holding you back. And through the exercises that I shared with you, you can get very clear on the identity that you need to break and the shift that you need to make in order to get to the identity that you hope to achieve. And if you're struggling with this identity framework, if you need help on supporting that identity, working through those steps, and becoming a high performer, the high performer that you were always meant to be, you can book a call with me for my one-on-one coaching, and I'll see if you're a good fit. But I want you to understand that this identity shift is not easy. I can sit here and make a video about this topic, but this requires real work. But the best part is the rewards are priceless. And finally, for all my high performers, I am building out a waitlist for my community. So if you're interested for a high performing community where you can connect with other like-minded individuals, click the first link in the description and fill out a type form. And once the community is ready to launch, you'll be one of the first ones to be notified for it. That is it for today's video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You know what I always say. Make sure to always believe that you will achieve. My name is Miles, aka Mr. High Performance, and I am signing off. Woo!